Today, we are doing a deep dive into a global crisis that has just exploded. It's gone from a diplomatic headache to a real existential threat to the Western alliance. I'm talking about the proposed U.S. acquisition of Greenland.
It's an incredibly volatile situation.
Right. And for you, our listener, the mission here is pretty simple. We're going to help you understand how the United States went from, just suggesting a purchase
Yeah.
to actually threatening military force.
And economic ruin.
And economic ruin against Denmark, one of its oldest NATO allies. We really need to unpack the history, the strategic why behind it, and of course the very strong opposition from Copenhagen and Greenland itself.
It's crucial to just start with the basic facts on the ground. Geographically, politically.
Okay, lay it out for us.
We're talking about Greenland. It's the world's largest island. I mean, the scale is immense. 836,000 square miles.
So for comparison,
That's about 6 times the size of Germany. But, and this is key, it's home to only around 57,000 people.
Wow. And politically, where does it fit in?
Politically, it's a semi-autonomous territory. It's part of the Kingdom of Denmark. So while Greenland handles its own internal stuff, Denmark keeps absolute control over 2 things: defense and foreign policy.
And that's the foundation this whole crisis is built on.
Exactly.
A foundation that seems to have just crumbled. The conflict is really boiling over now, especially with a Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, warning the U.S. to back off.
She was incredibly direct.
She said a forcible American takeover would mean the immediate end of NATO, the end of the alliance. I mean, that's an unbelievable thing to say about an ally. Okay, let's unpack how we got here.
Well, the first time this idea of buying Greenland came up back in 2019, everyone sort of treated it as a bizarre real estate deal.
Right, a curiosity.
A curiosity, exactly. But what started happening in 2025 was a totally different animal. It became dramatic, aggressive, and moved way beyond a polite offer.
That's right. President Trump started asserting that U.S. ownership and control of Greenland is an absolute necessity. That's the phrase he used. A necessity for national security.
And critically, he refused to rule out using military or economic action to get it.
The pressure was just squarely on Denmark.
And it was specific. He threatened very high tariffs. This wasn't a vague threat, it had real teeth. Analysts figured a 10% EU-wide tariff could cause Denmark's GDP to drop by 3%.
And a 3% drop, that might not sound catastrophic to some, but we're talking about potentially billions of dollars. It's clear economic coercion.
It's using financial pain to force a strategic concession. Simple as that.
And this wasn't just talk from the White House. We saw bills in Congress.
Yes, actual legislative action. Bills like the Make Greenland Great Again Act and, my personal favorite, the Red, White, and Blue Land Act of 2025.
Wait, Red, White, and Blue Land? Seriously? That sounds like something out of a satire show.
It does. But the threat was made very real in June 2025 when the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, publicly confirmed it.
Confirmed what?
He confirmed the Pentagon had developed contingency plans to take Greenland by force if necessary, and that confirmed Denmark's absolute worst fears.
That Washington was seriously planning to use military force against a treaty partner. Unbelievable.
Which, as you can imagine, triggered a fierce, immediate rejection.
From both Greenland and Denmark. I remember the quote from Greenland's premier, Mute Borapieid.
So clear. He said, "Greenland is ours. We are not for sale and will never be for sale. Just period."
And Denmark's response was not just words. They put their money where their mouth was.
A massive boost to defense spending for Greenland. A double-digit billion krone commitment. They started sending more personnel, ordering patrol ships, drones, even upgrading airfields for their F-35s.
They were preparing to deter an ally.
Yes. And then came the ultimate sign of the diplomatic break.
The official threat assessment.
Absolutely. December 2025, the Danish Defense Intelligence Service publishes its new assessment, and for the first time in history, it lists the United States as a potential threat to its national security.
Placing Washington in the same category as Russia and China.
Just think about that. It signals that, from their perspective, the security relationship is broken. They feel they have to actively defend themselves from America.
And you could just feel the shockwave across Europe. Leaders like Germany's Olaf Scholz came out saying you can't just move borders by force.
And then, the diplomatic language completely fell apart. There was a Danish member of the European Parliament who pretty openly told President Trump to fuck off.
Right. It shows you just how raw and how broken that trust became almost overnight.
So connecting this all together, you have to ask the big question. Why? Why risk NATO Why risk all this for a sparsely populated island?
It'd have to be more than just real estate.
It boils down to security and resources, immediate security needs, and long-term economic goals.
Okay, so let's dig into that strategic why. What makes Greenland so militarily indispensable?
It's all about the geography. Greenland is the key to controlling what's known as the GIUK gap.
The Greenland-Iceland-UK gap.
Exactly. You can think of it like a giant maritime gate. During the Cold War, controlling that gate was everything. It was how NATO would stop Soviet submarines from getting into the North Atlantic.
But the Cold War's over.
Yeah.
Why is the GIUK gap so important again now?
Because Russia is back in the Arctic in a big way. They're militarizing it, building new, quiet submarines, new missile systems. So controlling the GIUK gap is, once again, the first line of defense. Without Greenland, that choke point is wide open.
And it's not just about the sea, right? There's the air and space angle, which I think a lot of people miss.
That's where Pacific Space Base comes in. It used to be called Thule Air Base.
Yeah.
It's one of only 2 Arctic facilities the U.S. has for tracking polar orbiting satellites.
And the satellites do what, exactly?
Everything. Critical communications, weather forecasting, and most importantly, the missile warning systems for North America.
Wow.
If the U.S. lost access to that base, they lose all redundancy in that sphere. It's a massive vulnerability.
So it's about controlling the gate at sea and in space.
Out.
Okay, let's shift to the economic side. The deal of the century, as they call it.
Right, because beneath all that ice is just immense untapped wealth. You've got estimates of maybe 50 billion barrels of offshore oil and gas.
Which is a lot. But the real prize, the thing that's defining the 21st century geopolitical race, that's the minerals, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The rare earth minerals. Greenland has some of the biggest deposits outside of China. We're talking about things like graphite and gallium.
And gallium is critical.
It's beyond critical. China controls something like 98% of the world's gallium supply. You need it for advanced semiconductors, for 5G, for modern weapons. So for the U.S., getting Greenland's resources is the key to breaking China's leverage on those supply chains.
So it's not just about finding more stuff. It's about strategic denial. It's about taking that power away from Beijing.
Precisely. And all of this is becoming more accessible because of climate change. The melting ice is opening up new Arctic shipping routes, like the Northwest Passage.
Which is a huge shortcut.
A huge shortcut. It could shave 4 days off a trip from the U.S. East Coast to Asia compared to the Panama Canal. Suddenly, Greenland isn't a frozen wasteland. It's a future global trade hub.
You know, this level of strategic obsession, it isn't actually new. And this is where the story gets really interesting. This has been going on for a long, long time.
It's a historical pattern. U.S. interest in Greenland goes back way before the Cold War. There were internal talks about acquiring it as early as 1867.
1867, that's the same time as the Alaska Purchase.
Exactly. Secretary of State William Seward was behind it. The guy clearly had an eye for northern real estate.
Even if everyone called Alaska Seward's Folly back then.
Right. The U.S. only formally recognized Danish sovereignty over all of Greenland in 1917, and that was actually part of the deal to get what is now U.S. Virgin Islands.
But Greenland's strategic role really became clear in World War II.
Yes. After Germany occupied Denmark, the U.S. basically occupied Greenland using the Monroe Doctrine to keep the Germans out.
And that military presence never really went away, did it?
It never left, which led to the most famous attempt before this one. In 1946, the U.S. secretly offered Denmark $100 million in gold bullion for the island.
Which today is worth what?
About $1 billion.
$1 billion for the world's largest island. That's a steal.
Denmark said no. They said it was about national identity, about sovereignty. So instead, they signed the 1951 Greenland Defense Agreement, which let the U.S. keep its bases, like Thule, without actually changing ownership.
So this idea of control, whether through purchase or just military agreements, it's this recurring theme, securing that northern flank.
And what's so fascinating now is how this new threat of U.S. takeover is playing right into Greenland's own internal politics.
You mean their independence movement?
Exactly. There's a strong, long-standing push for full independence from Denmark, which is actually allowed under their Self-Government Act.
So does this U.S. pressure help or hurt that movement? It seems complicated.
It's very complicated. For some Greenlanders, all this attention is actually leverage against Denmark, not because they want to be sold to the U.S., but because it forces Copenhagen to the table.
So they can negotiate a better deal for themselves. More investment, maybe a faster path to independence.
Exactly. It's about partnership and power, not annexation. And the polls are really clear on this.
What do they say about actually joining the U.S.?
Overwhelmingly against it. One big poll showed 85% rejected the idea, but, and here's the nuance, almost 70% said they wanted more cooperation with the U.S.
They want the benefits of the relationship without sacrificing their sovereignty.
Which is why there's been talk of other models, something like a COFA.
A compact of free association.
Right. It's what the U.S. has with some Pacific Island nations. The U.S. gets military access so they could keep Pacific base in exchange for economic aid, and the nation keeps its full sovereignty.
That sounds like a pretty sensible compromise. But the administration pushed for ownership instead.
And pushed hard with coercion that wasn't just economic. This is where it gets into some really disturbing territory, what some Danes called hybrid warfare from an ally.
What exactly were the allegations? What was the U.S. accused of doing?
The claims were serious. Danish intelligence said the U.S. was going beyond just, gathering information. They actually summoned U.S. diplomats over reports that American officials were running covert ops to foment secessionism in Greenland.
Foment secessionism.
Yeah.
You mean actively trying to stir up political instability?
Yes. Actively trying to encourage a faster, maybe even a chaotic break from Denmark, which the U.S. could then take advantage of. The allegation is that they were targeting independence leaders, maybe offering support.
It's an incredible breach of trust.
It's shocking for the U.S. to see Greenland as essential for its security, but then to risk alienating the entire region with these kinds of tactics. It shows you the level of perceived desperation.
So when you bring it all together,
Yeah.
what we're seeing is this modern, aggressive, expansionist drive from the U.S.
And it's rooted in those long-standing priorities, the GIUK gap, rare earths.
And it's clashing head-on with Denmark's idea of sovereignty and the Greenlandic people's right to self-determination.
Right. And it shows that even a small nation like Denmark has leverage through NATO, but that very alliance is now strained to the breaking point. The whole future here really hinges on one question.
Which is?
Can Greenland use all this global attention to build a real path to independence? Or will it just be forced into a new kind of subservient relationship with either Denmark or the U.S.?
And with experts putting Greenland's total value at over $1 trillion, the Financial Times said about $1.1 trillion, and with the people there so strongly opposed to joining the U.S., we're left with a final thought for you to chew on.
In the 21st century, what ultimately decides the fate of a territory? Is it the financial value? Or is it the national security imperative of a superpower?
That's the question that NATO and really the whole world is being forced to answer right now.